Hi guys, it's Griffin, and because this is our first project, I figured we might want to go over some common debug steps that could help you if you run into issues during the project. So what I have in front of me is a sample for your project 3.5, what yours could end up looking like, but it has a few issues. Let's start with the first most glaring issue. You could see that the file displays as red even after saving, which implies that there's an error. Looking at this sidebar right here on VS Code can be very useful to identifying where those errors are. See, there's a little yellow warning right here. That means that a variable might not be used. That's fine. But a red error. Now, a red error means that the code will not run. You may also see a red error when you go to simulate, and then you'll see that your simulation doesn't work due to your build failing. You can check that out in this little terminal down here. So if you scroll up, it'll show you what the problem was, compile Java, so there was a compilation error, then even points to you where the issue is. It can also be useful to use this little hyperlink here, even if I'm in a different file. If I control click on this, it will bring me to the location of the problem. So the first thing to look into is what you're actually getting an error on. You can see the little red squigglies under the get. Hovering over it tells me that get int is not defined for the type joystick. So that means two things to me. Either I'm calling the wrong method, or int is not what it's looking for. In that case, what I'd do is I'd leverage VS Code's autocomplete. So I'd get rid of what I had, and then type get, and look at what the potential options are suggested by VS Code. So you can see that there's get raw button pressed. Get raw button sounds like what I meant because I wanted this shooter motor to be controlled while it was held. So all you need to do then is hit enter to use that, and remember that our ID was 1. And now that error should be gone. You can see that the file shows up in yellow. Yet again, that's just because of an unused variable. That's fine. Let's try simulating using real driver station. Uh-oh. Looking at the driver station, you see we lost communication in code. And looking back at the terminal, we see that it started to run, but then the terminal, this is where you should go to see if you have code issues, it shows an error. It tells us that's a Java null pointer exception. Can't call the configurator because the elevator motor is null. It even gives you a little hyperlink for where to go to, so let's jump there. So it's trying to call a get configurator, but it says the elevator is null. So let's see, where are those motors instantiated again? Yeah, up here. And oop, looks like the other ones were instantiated to be actually create a device using the new Talon effects part. But we forgot to do it here. Let's add that in. And let's give it ID 5. ID 5 isn't used. Let's simulate again. Build successful. Simulate. The code doesn't crash. Awesome. Let's use our SimGUI to do some readouts. Going into teleoperated, we should be able to control our tank drive pretty easily using our joysticks. So if I press up, I should see. So which ones again are our drive motors? We have primary is 0 for the left and primary is 2 for the right. So if I press the stick on the left, we can see that this goes up, and its follower number 1 should go 2. They both move together. Perfect. Let's check number 2. So if we go up on our right stick, uh-oh, nothing's happening. Now, why could that be? Let's go check where our motors are set to move. So we know that the left side primary set works, and the right side primary use a very similar line, so that shouldn't be the issue. A good troubleshooting step can be to eliminate out the things that you know are identical when one thing works and the other isn't. For example, these set commands, how we see that one of them definitely works, the other doesn't, despite using the same method. So that leaves us with this part right here. Getting the raw access, we see that this is access 2. Let's look back at our controller and what happens when we press the right joystick up. Oop, that changes axis 5. Well, that actually controls axis 2. That's the left trigger. That explains it. So a common error can be misidentifying your buttons. You need to make sure that they're correct before running and check if stuff isn't working as expected, whether your IDs are correct. Let's fix that. Reload our simulator. Checking again inside of our robot simulation tab, we can see that left joystick up brings 0 and 1 up and down. Perfect. Checking 2, right joystick up brings 2 up. Perfect. What about its follower 3? Wait, there's no 3. Now, why would there be no 3? Let's go take a look at code. So when you have an issue with motors like this, the first thing I'd usually check is tuner X. If you're connected to a real robot, you can check here and you might see that some of your motors aren't showing up, which would be an electrical issue, meaning a lack of connection. But since we're in simulator, that shouldn't be a problem. Let's look at where that motor is actually instantiated. So we have 0, 1, 2, and then the right side follower is also 2. Uh-oh. Should probably correct that. So it should actually be ID 3. This is why copy and pasting can be a little bit risky. And whenever you copy and paste, you have to be very careful to do a double over and make sure that every number and every changed part of the copy and pasted things are as you expect them to be. Let's save the file and try simulating again. Now, looking at our ID list, we have motor 3. Perfect. Let's make sure it works. Up and down on motor 1. Up and down on motor 2 and 3. Now let's check if the most complicated part of this whole project works. That would be the elevator part. So if we remember earlier, we assigned the elevator motor to be ID 5, so let's check in the 5 box. In code, we wrote that button 2 should be the one that activates the elevator. So let's see what happens when we press button 2. Oh, it turns on, and let's count. 3, 4, 5. It turns off. Perfect, just like we expect. Now, when we toggle that button again, the elevator should turn around and go the opposite direction for 5 seconds. Let's press our button and see what happens. Wait. Nothing's happening. Let's go check why that could be. So if we look in the code, we create our motor. We configured it. It isn't following anything else it shouldn't be. We gave it current limits. We see that we reset our 5-second timer in teleop init, so there won't be any lingering time. So we got to figure out what the issue is in this whole part. Maybe the toggle's not working. Maybe the timer's not working. Maybe the direction's causing us issues. So the main thing to do here is to print out some of those key values and see if they match what you expect them to be. Let's do a smart dashboard dot put boolean. And we're going to look at button is pressed. That's our little toggle boolean that helps us know when we've pressed that button for a toggle. Key for the smart dashboard put is going to be button is pressed. The value is going to be button is pressed. Now, let's also check out our direction. So we're going to do smart dashboard dot put number. And we're going to pass in the direction variable. Some other things. What else could be a concern? Let's actually check the Xbox button. Make sure we're getting that correctly. So it's button 2 as the key. And we're going to check the exact same line that we wrote up here. Here's a place where copy and pasting is useful to make sure that you're accurate. And last, it could be an issue with the timer. Let's see what our timer reads. So we're going to put a number. We're going to put the key as the timer. And let's use timer.get just like we are right here. Restart the code. See what happens. So I restarted the code and none of those printouts showed up. That's because we can see that we do this in teleop periodic. So as soon as we enable the robot, these printouts will show. Alright. Button is pressed. Oops, looks like I have a minor type out there. Xbox button, direction, and timer. Button is pressed is off as we expect. I'm not touching this controller. Xbox button 2 is off as expected. Direction's -1, which, if we look into our code, aligns with what we set it as by default. So that's all good. and the timer's at 0 like we expect. So I've got a little robot simulation tab set up. Let's see what happens when we run. If I enable, everything looks good. This motor's off. Let's see what happens when I press the button. This is going to happen fast, so let's pay attention. What we expect to happen is button is pressed to turn on, Xbox button 2 to turn on, and direction to flip to 1, and this timer to start. So I'm going to press the button, holding that aligns, let go of the button. That makes sense. The timer hits 5 and stops. The motor stops. Perfect. Now let's see what happens when I toggle it the other way. Button is pressed, activates. Direction flips. I let go, so these turn off. But the timer shouldn't be 5. I just pressed that button. So now we know that's an issue with the timer. Let's go back into the code. Stopping the simulator. So looking at our timer, what we expect to happen is when we press the button again, the timer resets for a new set of 5 seconds. So where is it that we press the actual button? That'd be right here. This indicates that first activation of the button. We see that we have a timer.start here, but we don't have a timer.reset. Let's add that in before the start. Let's see if that works. Back in the simulator, I'm going to enable the robot. We got our readouts. Press the button once. We've seen this work. Still does work. Our timer's running. Our motor's going. Stops after 5 seconds. Perfect. Direction was up. Press it again. Direction should go to -1. Timer should reset to 0 and start again. And it should start moving with a duty cycle in the negative direction. Direction's negative. Timer resets. Duty cycle in the negative direction. And it stops for 5 seconds. Press it again. Goes back up. Press it again. Goes back down. That looks good to me. So now we've seen that our robot functions as expected. Now, if all else fails, it might be valuable to look online for resources. The WPILib docs, you could just find this with a simple Google search, can be a good place to start. It has some tutorials on Zero to Robot, a lot of stuff about programming, has the API documentation for every single class. If you're running into an issue that's more like a how-to, this is where I'd look first. On the other hand, if you're running into a more technical issue, a more specific error that you're trying to troubleshoot, I'd look at Chief Delphi. So this is a FRC-oriented forum that's been running for many years. People share on it about all kinds of things, about events, about progress, about achievements, about issues. What we're here for is to look for past programming questions. So if you look at the categories, there exists a category specifically for programming right over here. Click on it, and you can see all these threads about programming. Some of them are people sharing interesting stuff, like these commit messages. Some people are sharing their new libraries that they made. But some people will be talking about problems that they have. You can sign up and add a thread asking for help. They have this handy how to ask a question tutorial. Or you could search for the specific bug you're having and see if anybody else has talked about it before. I wish you luck in your troubleshooting. It's probably the hardest part in FRC. I hope this all helps.